to the week of April the 2nd, which is the reference week, we see that the demand for bus tickets, and seeing the fact that Check My Bus is mainly focusing on longer distances, intercity and even international transport, still we see that in the countries where the COVID-19 trend is going down, we see that demand for bus services is taking up quite quickly again. It is not in the same position as it was before the crisis. As you see in the lower graphic, you see that April 2nd compared to February 27th, for Italy, for example, demand has gone down by 78% and so more. So we also see that, for example, in Latin and South America in this period, where the COVID-19 crisis was still not at its full height, that the decrease of demand was slower in that part of the world. So we see that we lost a market share between the start of the crisis and the first week of April of up to 80%, still going down in Latin and South America. But we also see that in the countries where the situation is getting better, the demand for bus services is picking up quite fast again. So the confidence in our sector is apparently restoring. I'd like to thank Mark and Check My Bus for this information. It was, I think, the perfect start for this seminar. So it's a good time to start talking about taking up bus services again. I'd like to welcome our speakers for today. Mr. Fang Li is the Deputy Director of the Jinan Transport Corporation in China. And in China, you are already completely operational again. From China, we go to Brussels. Very welcome, Mrs. Van den Brandt, Minister for Mobility in Brussels. And from Brussels, we fly over the ocean and we go to New York, where Craig Cipriano is the acting president for the New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority. From there, we take a poll, we take a small rest. And after that, we go to India. Mr. Prasanna Patwardhan is the president of the Confederation of the Indian Bus Operators, where we'll see how or what the criteria are for private companies to respond to this picking up of this of the bus operations again. And last speaker for today is Ms. Raki Basu, who is the transport advisor for the World Bank and also a member of the Smart Pandemic Management Group of the University of California in Berkeley. Very welcome to all the speakers. I would like to invite all the attendees to participate very interactive and active in this seminar. And how to do this, I would like to give the word to Hans, who will explain how you can participate in this. Hans?
Yes, hello everyone. Just hold on a second, I will quickly share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so I will quickly explain the tools that we will use today in our Zoom webinar, for those of you that never attended a Zoom webinar. So first of all, at the bottom of your screen, you have a Zoom toolbar. Here you have a chat function. This function will be used today to chat amongst the attendees. So if you want to speak to each other, just use this function. Once you push this button, the screen on the right will appear. And here you can choose to talk to the panelists only or to amongst the attendees, right here. The second function that we will use today is the Q&A, which is this button. So when you push this button, you can ask a question to the panelists directly. So if you really have an interesting question to pose to one of our speakers today, please use this function. So once you click on the Q&A button, this screen will appear. And here you can ask your question. So you write down what you would like to ask. You can also ask the question anonymously if you would like. And then you just hit the send button and we will receive it. Once that is done, you will see an overview of all the questions that are asked. So not only your questions, but also the questions that other people asked. If you think somebody else asked a very interesting question and you would like to have the same, also the answer to it, then you can choose to upvote or to like that question. You do that by hitting this like button here. Okay. The second tab, you have an overview of your own questions asked. So, okay. The third thing, like Jan just told you, we will use a poll. 2 polls will be asked during the webinar. The screen will just pop up when we start the poll. So we just answer right here and hit the submit button. So that's it for the technical explanation of this webinar. Go ahead, Jan.
Thank you so much, Hannes. I think this is a very warm invitation to participate very actively in this big group discussion. Let's go to China. China was hit first by this crisis and is now starting up again and has evolved in, let's say, the startup. Mr. Fong, can you please explain how you started up activities in your Jinan Bus Corporation? The word is yours. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen. Okay, hello everyone. It's my honor to attend the webinar and to share the measures we have taken during the crisis of the COVID-19. We didn't lock down the bus service, but the total volume was cut down to the less than 5% of the normally total passenger volume. So, in my opinion, the bus service has through a process of the resumption. Firstly, I will give you a brief introduction about the Jinan city and the Jinan public transport group. Jinan is one of the metropolitans in China, and which population is more than 9 million, and the total area is more than 10,000 square kilometers. Jinan is well known by the Spring City, so we didn't have the subway lines in the central city because of the spring protection. So the bus is the most important trip mode. Our group as a company is a unique operating enterprise in Jinan. By February the 2020s, we have the employees more than 13,000 and operating more than 5,800 vehicles and 346 bus routes. Normally, before the crisis, we carry 2 million passengers per day. So this is a brief. This page showed we use the intelligent system to monitor the passengers in the station for the waiting bus. So we can arrange more bus or less bus to deal with the passengers, and the passengers can make their trip plan according to we post the route schedule in our app. So we use the intelligent system. Firstly, I will put the focus on the measures of the COVID prevention. Firstly, aim to guarantee the safe environment of the vehicles. We arrange special staff who have got the special training by the special training in charge of the disinfection. We purely infect the whole carriage. You maybe use the disinfectant like we use the disinfectant to clean the bus carrier. For example, the floor, the chair, the armrest, and so on. Secondly, in order to guarantee the health of the drivers, the company provides the necessary protective materials such as the masks, gloves, and so on. And the driver have to take the temperature before they are on duty. If the temperature exceeds 37.3 degree, the driver forbidden driving bus and he will back home for the medical observation, and then to report the health to the bus fleet. Thirdly, to ensure the passenger safety, before they boarding the bus, the passengers are required to wear mask and take temperature. Also leads the temperature standard. Show their photo ID, and after taking bus, they still required to scan the code to register about the information like the plate number and his destination destination. In order to keep the social distance, we set the we saw the maximum the shifting rate about 50%. Different kind of the bus, we set different the number about the boarding total numbers. The staff will persuade them to take the next bus if the capacity is exceed the 50% standard. At the same time, we remind the passenger do not close the windows. Do not close the windows during the trip, and do not to sit closely during the trip. Then all the measures we have been summarized and published as an industrial standard industry standard document. It will provide a mode or manual to the other enterprise in China. Give them a manual how to deal with the prevention and the control of the crisis. Yeah, in the aspect of encouraging passengers to take bus. Firstly, after the crisis, firstly the official of the government to take the lead in taking bus, give the sense that the bus service and the bus system is trustworthy. So this is the first step. And our company paid a lot of effort on the communicating with the passengers. Use the hotline, the website to eliminate the hesitation about maybe scare the safety of the transit. So at last, I show you the figure. The figure has the curve and the chart. The curve is during all the period of the crisis from the January of the 2020. So you can see we take the lower input, and during the total volume has cut down to in the list number is 80,000 per day. And now after the measures we taken, so the total passenger volume is increased step by step. Now is about 80%, about 80,000. 80,000, yeah, 80,000 total volume per day, maybe more or less less than 5% of the normally. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wong. Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. If you allow me, I've been taking a look at the questions that came in from our attendees. So you mentioned that you were about at 80% of normal capacity again today, but seeing the rules for social distancing that are obliged, do you in your operations, do you implement more buses now? Do you need more buses to guarantee social distancing? Or are you at the same level but with a higher frequency, or how do you operate this?
Yeah. So I'll correct the number, not the 80% or the 8,000, the total passenger number. Yeah, this is now the total volume. In the whole period, because of the cut down of the total volume, so we have about more than half the free vehicles and the bus. So with the increase of the total volume, we will put more bus and to less the frequency, maybe the headway from to the 30 minutes and to up down to the 20 minutes or 10 minutes. So this is one method. Another method, because of the cut down of the passenger, we we have the many free drivers. So we arrange these drivers as the staffs in the bus besides the driver. So we have the 2 staffs in the bus in the trip. So this staff, the charge is to remind the passengers. Maybe I mentioned in the presentation. Maybe don't close the windows. So and don't sit to step beside. So they use the social distance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fong. That was most interesting. Thank you so much. Questions or other questions from the attendees will be sent to you to reply via email then. But thank you very much.
Okay. I got to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Wong.
Yeah.
Let's go from China to Brussels. Very welcome, Ms. Elke van den Brand. You're the Minister for Mobility in Brussels. The situation in Belgium right now is not the same as it is in China, but we're opening slowly business again from next Monday onwards. And then in different phases, we will start up again. How will you ensure, as the Minister for Mobility in Brussels, that bus operations are efficient, effective, viable, and still very safe for the Brussels audience?
These are the main questions. I hope I can share you some slides, but if it's not possible, then I'll just talk because I do. No, I'm not having my slides share. Okay, now I'll just talk through it because otherwise I lose a lot of time. So we have actually, the situation in Belgium for the moment is we're at the moment in the middle of the lockdown or near lockdown. People who are in the possibility to work from home are asked to work from home. Schools are closed, shops are closed. So the whole life in Brussels, like in many places in the world, is down, which has a huge impact also on our public transport and our buses. So we noticed during this lockdown period that we had about 15% of the people, of the demand of public transport in general, not only the buses, but the public transport in general. We also only have 15% of the offer. It's not because we are not putting all the buses into the system, but it's actually because we need to keep social distancing on the buses, which means that people need to keep 1.5 meters from one another, also in the buses, also in the public transport. So we needed to adapt for it. So that means that we are on 3 out of 4 seats you cannot use. We have stickers on the seats to show people where they can sit and where they can then go. But the capacity, of course, of buses is lowered depending on how big the bus is. It's about 6 to 8 people, sometimes 11 people that can go on. So it has a huge impact on the capacity of the buses, but also on the demand. So on the demand side, we see that, of course, most people are working or living from home. So the necessity of public transport has diminished. We needed to keep the public transport running. It's really important because you need to have your doctors to go to the hospital. You need to have the people who need to go where you need to offer them public transport. So we continued working in very difficult circumstances, I think, especially for the bus drivers and people who are in contact with the public. So we did a lot of extra cleaning services. We provided masks for drivers. It took a while because, as in many places in the world, we have a lack of masks. So the drivers were, of course, the bus drivers were not the first priority. The first priority were people working in the health institutions. So now I'm very happy that we have masks for all our drivers. As I said, we have stickers on the seats to show how to use social distancing. You cannot pay with cash. You need to pay cashless in the bus. You need to get up on the back of the bus. So a whole series of measurements in order to make it possible to continue using our public transport, but in a way that it's not a risk for the health and the contamination. Every support for advertising was used to explain to people what was happening. So there was a very good information system and was also a very good support from the travel. I think it was nice to see that people are posting on Twitter and Instagram like, okay, we miss you, Stip, we love you, Stip. But so there's a lot of support for and gratitude from the population towards the public transport, and that's good to see, of course, in this situation. We also needed the help of the police. Police is checking on social distance. Everything is unfortunately, it's necessary on many places and some lines. So this is the situation during the crisis, and it's in which we're in now. But we do have some perspective. As from the 4th of May, we will start with the exit strategy. It's bit by bit. The shops will open, part of schools will open, so we are restarting life. And one of the big questions is how we will do so with public transport. What does it mean for our public transport? It's a big question, because we are now at the maximum of the capacity if we need to maintain this 1.5 meter distance between people. So that's really a problem, because public transport is crucial in order to reopen shops or schools. The federal government decided that in places like public transport where you cannot guarantee social distancing, that the mask will be an obligation to wear. And in that, with that situation, they hope that we can have a higher capacity on buses and on public transport. Of course, we will monitor that, because if we end up with overcrowded buses, then it won't take long before we have a health problem. So there will be monitoring on how it's working and whether people are still respecting this, keeping distancing among one another, but it will be a little bit less strict than in the current situation. So I think that's an important aspect to go to the exit strategy for our country. The STIP, our public transport company, is very responsive. In every phase they've adapted. They're very flexible. They've shown an enormous flexibility in this period, and I'm very grateful to them for that. And they will continue to do so. So they will change the frequency, the hour scheme that is being used depending on which parts of society are reopened again, whether the shops reopen or the schools. So they also adapted the lines. So for the moment in this lockdown period, where especially hospitals and healthcare institutions needed to be serviced, they changed the bus lines on those in that way, so that we have a higher capacity going to the hospitals. So, but when the schools reopen, there will be some rescheduling. So it's with a huge flexibility and a very responsive way that public transport is adapting to the situation. Of course, we will be doing extra cleaning. It's really important that we continue cleaning our vehicles, and we will support things that are on something that it's that can make sure that you don't have peak hours. In Belgium, we have an incredible tradition of working 9 to 5, and it's really 9 to 5. It's not 8:30 to 4:30. It's 9 to 5. So avoiding peak hours would really make a difference. So hoping to explain to people that if you go to work, start at 10, perhaps start at 7, just change your hours and make sure that the peak hours are a bit stretched out. We hope that the teleworking, everybody's now discovering all kinds of applications to do meetings and everything. So we hope that part of that can stay, and that we will introduce more teleworking, and in that way that we can make sure that we can flatten the curve, not only from COVID, but also flatten the curve of the peaks in our public transport. That's the answer from our public transport. I'm also a minister, so the political answer is also important. So on a political way, normally I'm always promoting use public transport. I'm trying to be their best advertiser and making sure that everybody continues to love our public transport. But at this moment, I have a very different message. I'm saying, if you love our public transport, if you love STIF, please go by bike or go by foot. Leave the capacity on our public transport for those people who cannot use their bike, who cannot go by foot, who don't have an alternative, and make sure that if you have the possibility, you go by bike or you go by foot. And it's really important, especially if you see at the specific situation in Brussels, because 2/3 of the commute within Brussels is for less than 5 kilometers. So within Brussels, the distances are actually quite small for 2/3 of the time. So if you only go for 5 kilometers or less, a bike or even by foot is often a really good way to do so. So let's use that for a modal shift. And this solidarity that we ask from people to do so is something that we try to really give as a message. Like, yeah, there are heroes in the crisis. Public transport drivers are one of the heroes. Please protect them and try to avoid them if possible. In order to do so, we're really investing massively in infrastructure for pedestrians and for cyclists. So we'll have about 40 kilometers of extra bike lane that will be put in place in the next weeks. We have a whole series of pedestrian zones, a slow street we call them. It's about, we're going to 100 kilometers of those kind of streets. So we hope in that way that walking in Brussels or cycling in Brussels is something that is really nice to do, fun to do, and safe to do. And in that way, we hope to convince people to do a modal shift, not to go to the car, because if everybody's taking their car because they want to avoid public transport, we'll have more traffic jams, and we already have enough of them, but there will be even more traffic jams. Public transport will be stuck in traffic jams. So the main message on a political level now is to make a modal shift to go by foot or by bike, or even do a little part by car and then change to a bike, or do the last miles by foot. That's a really important aspect of our political response to this crisis. But I promise to be short and not to talk too long, and to take some time, to leave some time for questions and remarks, so that I will do so, and then leave the moderator to continue.
Thank you, Ms. Minister. There's two types of questions that I see passing in the Q&A right now. One question is, due to social distancing, do you also foresee that we will need more buses to guarantee this? And will this influence the price of a bus ticket? That's one question. Second question is, do you foresee any measures to restore confidence of the public in collective transport after this crisis as well? Because referring everybody to individual transport is not a complete solution as well. We will always need collective transport by bus and coach. So we need to do things to restore it. Yeah. Can I ask you a very short answer to that? Because I also got a message that you're asked in another meeting as well.
I skip my next meeting, so I have time. So for the first question, do we need more buses? Well, we could use more buses. If we would have more buses and more drivers, we could have a higher capacity. But for the moment, every driver that is available is on the street driving. So we are at our max. We cannot go to a higher level. So the only way to have a higher capacity is to leave more people on each bus. So that's the only margin we have. There's a difference because that's within the capital, within Brussels. In the whole of Belgium, there's another situation. The other public transport operators do have some margin in their capacity. So, but within the region of Brussels, we still have, we are at the maximum we can do. So we need these masks to that. We will not change the ticket prices. We don't think that's a good idea, because we do love our public transport, and asking people more to pay for it, I don't think it's the right answer for the moment, because people who use public transport really need it. For the second series of questions, I lost track. It was about.
Do you foresee some measures to restore trust in public transport?
Yeah. So for the moment, we're not saying that it's not healthy to take the bus. I think that's really important to say. We are cleaning, we do everything, but so we're focusing on this aspect of social distancing, saying it is okay. You can take public transport, it is safe, but if you don't need it, leave it to those who need it. But I really hope once this crisis is over that I can go back in promoting our public transport and saying everybody, well, just go take the bus, it's great, and go back to our public transport. But it's too soon for that. But I hope once this health crisis is over, and I hope it will be soon, that we can do so, and of course we will.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your attendance as well. We will have some questions or more questions or discussion at the end of this webinar. But anyway, thank you so much. Let's cross the Atlantic. Let's go to Mr. Cipriano. Hi, Craig. What's the situation in New York, and how is New York, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, preparing for reactivation of bus and coach services?
Okay, hi, thank you. Hans, can you please share the PowerPoint with the group? Thank you. So just a little bit about the New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority before I go into the presentation. So we're the largest public transportation network in all of North America. We operate subways, bus, commuter rails, and also bridges and tunnels in around New York City. We are a quasi-city-state public benefit corporation, and we do all our work with in-house forces. We don't contract out the work. Specifically on the bus side, we have 18,000 employees, about a $3 billion annual operating budget. And pre-COVID, we carried about 2.2 million daily customers across 54,000 bus trips. 327 bus routes, and nearly 6,000 buses. It's just a little background. Next slide, please. So New York City has over 8 million people, and quite frankly, it's been hit the hardest in all of the United States. Just a little bit of a timeline about New York City and what we've experienced. March 1st, we saw our first confirmed coronavirus case. March 7th, New York declared a state of emergency, and part of that was restricting gatherings of over 500 people, closing down some of our restaurants, bars, and non-essential industries. On March 22nd, the governor of New York State announced what he calls New York Pause, where really all non-essential employees and industries were asked to quarantine and stand down. And that's when we went into, around that same time frame, what we call our essential service plan to support that. A little bit about the demographics. New York City has over 160,000 confirmed cases, or nearly 20% of all of the United States. At the MTA specifically, we've had 3,600 confirmed cases, with over 2,800 folks currently quarantined, and over 100 confirmed positive COVID just in the bus system alone. Nearly 1,000 currently quarantined. At our peak absences, we were nearly at 1/3 of our bus operator workforce, so about 4,000 bus operators were absent at our peak. And again, unfortunately, we've had 32 fatalities alone in the bus family. A little bit about the service side. So ridership currently is more than 80% off from our peak, but we're still supplying or providing between 70-75% of our service in order to provide enough service for those folks needing to get to work, namely hospital workers, police, firemen, and the like, and also provide the ability to social distance in and around our buses. Next slide, please. Some of the things that we've done over the past 6 weeks or so is that we've gone to a disinfection process every 72 hours, and we started to test some of this antimicrobial shield treatments on our buses. We currently have about 1,000 buses with some antimicrobial shield treatment. And over the course of the last 6 weeks, we've done about 50,000 disinfections of our bus. Also, we provided all our employees protective equipment, including masks and gloves, sanitizers. We're currently in the process of buying seat covers for our bus operators. And right now, we made it mandatory that all public transit employees wear masks while operating in public service. We also implemented a rear door boarding policy, whereby we've closed off the first 6 feet of all buses. Initially, we closed it off with a plastic chain. Since then, we've gotten a little bit more robust with the chaining, a sign, and also we're using some vinyl sheeting across the aisle, basically window to window. Our real challenge here is that our local service buses, about 4,700 of our 6,000 buses, do have bus operator barriers, but it's not fully enclosed, as I'm sure folks know. The glare issue has always been something that hasn't been able to be solved. So to the extent that there still is a contact at the fare box between customers and bus operators, that caused us and our bus operators a big concern. So in order to alleviate that, besides asking them to wear masks, we've gone to rear door boarding. Looking ahead, we were in the process of implementing our tap and go fare payment system, and we do envision that at some point we will be taking cash off the bus. We're looking to accelerate that so that we can have all door boarding with tap and go and alleviate that bus operator to customer fare box interaction. On the express bus side, just quickly, what we've done is our express buses do not have any barriers. We've chained off the first 2 rows of all express buses, and this way, again, to provide some 6-foot social distancing from the bus operator to our customers. We've also implemented temperature testing across the entire MTA, and right now we're doing it on a rotating basis. As we look to unpause our service and go back up to full service in the coming weeks, we're looking to do that on a 24/7, 365 basis at all our locations. Employees that test over 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit are asked to go home until they have 3 days fever below that without using any fever reducing meds. That's currently our policy there. Another key piece has been a strong customer information campaign. Quite frankly, the governor of New York State made it mandatory that anyone riding on public transit should be wearing masks. It's not being enforced by the police. We're enforcing it passively, and we're continuing to have a strong message around that. And again, our bus operators are required to wear masks, and we provide them on a daily basis. Next slide, please. So as we look ahead, really the electeds, and the next major milestone for us is May 15th. You see it there. We're on pause until May 15th, and we're awaiting the electeds to make a decision on what May 15th is a Friday, what that May 17th or that Monday would mean. Right now, current indications are the electeds are looking at potentially what is considered to be essential construction to start to open up. So that would mean that we would expect more ridership to come back on our buses. The decision is being made, and because the New York City, we call this area the tri-state region, the decision is being made not only in New York, but in conjunction with New Jersey and Connecticut and surrounding states, so that it opens up at a regional basis. And what we need to do really to prepare for this is we need to, number one, is make sure that our bus operators and our employees are safe. We need to make sure that we have the amount of bus operators available to operate a more robust service. And when I mean a robust service, at this point, as I mentioned, we're operating about 70% of a peak service for about 20% of normal ridership, somewhere in the neighborhood of 400,000 customers a day versus our 2.2 million. However, as customers come back to the system, we know we need to maintain social distancing. We don't envision that we would be taking away that 6-foot barrier in the near term. So we already lose about a third of our bus already. And so we were looking to provide back the capacity that we normally would do as the amount of our customers start to increase. Next slide, please. So again, some of this I already touched upon. Come May 17th, we're starting to work with our union counterparts to prepare for putting back full service sometime around that time. And again, we're working hard on increased cleaning. That's also another big piece of this. We're looking at going to a 24, 48-hour cleaning cycle as opposed to the current 72-hour cycle. Currently, we've been doing that, the cleaning specifically based upon hand wipe down cleaning with the proper disinfectants. We've now been testing and we're bringing on board some low volume, some high volume, low pressure sprayers, as well as some electrostatic sprayers, and even some fogging type of equipment to see which one would work best in order for us to get more cleaning. We've also started to clean, which we typically do not do, disinfect out on the street during the day. So we're cleaning bus operator compartments, wiping down passenger compartments at the end of trips, and doing the best we can to keep the buses disinfecting and showing our customers and bringing their comfort level back to our bus system. And then the last piece I wanted to just touch here is really about the bus operator barrier. As I said, we had that 6-foot barrier behind the bus operator. We know that we need to bring back fares. We haven't collected fares for about 6 weeks. The current financial situation in the MTA is very precarious. We recently were appropriated $3.9 billion from the federal government to keep us afloat for a time frame. We've asked for another $4 billion through the end of the year, but again, we're spending an awful lot of money on the disinfecting process and other social distancing protocols and PPE and not collecting fares. So that's really a challenge for us here currently in New York City. Next slide, please. All right. So really, I just would like to close with, as we look to reopen, we're really looking to reimagine the bus system the way it's been in the past. Whether the reimagination means, going to all-door boarding, definitely providing new protections to our frontline employees. We're looking at ways in which we can do what we call pull in, pull out, which means that bus operators don't have to hand off buses to another bus operator making a relief. So they feel more comfortable that it's themselves in the bus operator compartment until they take on a new disinfected bus. And then the last thing is we're working hard on in-house the social distancing protocols. A bus depot, as we all know, is really an industrial environment. You have hundreds and hundreds of people that come into the bus depot before they take out the bus, and then during the peak times. And we know that social distancing and making sure that we keep people safe in and around the bus depot is very important to the health of the bus system as we move ahead. And I'd like to say thank you for having me here today. I appreciate the invite.
Thank you so much, Craig. That was most interesting. So far, we have been listening to 3 public transport agencies who are also the operator. So they are not working, not in Jinan, not in Brussels, not in New York. You are not working with private subcontractors. Yeah, we got a lot of questions coming into the Q&A saying, who's paying for all these extra measures, all this extra cleaning? I come back to you, Craig. Who's paying for that?
Yeah, so that's really a challenge for us right now at the MTA. What I could say is, our current policy and the thought is we have to do it, so we're doing it, and we're concerned with the payment on the back end. Our finance people have done a number of things in regards to moving dollars between our capital budgets and our operating budgets. We've gone out and done some bonding to, although it increases our debt, we recognized that cash flow was becoming an issue. So we've done some bonding there. We did, as I said, get $3.9 billion appropriated from the federal government on the first go around, and we're asking for another $4 billion. But for sure, finances is a concern of ours. But again, we know that our primary mission and concern is to keep our customers and employees safe. And then also we know that the MTA, specifically in New York City, is a key piece to bringing back not only New York City, but the entire United States economy. And that's the way we're looking at it at this point.
Okay. That's, I think, the very correct way to look at it. But still, it is a problem. One last question, I ask it to you, Craig, but it really could be addressed to Jinan or Brussels. Or if you lack vehicles to provide services guaranteeing social distancing, is the offer of coach operators who cannot travel, who do not have groups right now, the coach business is completely down, right? Or almost completely down. They have vehicles available. Is the implementation of coaches in cities where you work to guarantee the offer and still guarantee social distancing, could that be an option?
So what I would, I'm sorry, I guess I'll just jump in and then someone else. So what I would say here in New York, we've already been approached by some coach operators, just for what you said, that they do have the ability to support our operations, and we are keeping that in mind. What I would say is, as we look ahead, that really would be a major paradigm switch for us here in New York. As you know, we operate in a heavily unionized environment. We would have to partner with our internal local unions in regards to having to augment those services in the short term. But again, these are unprecedented times, and I believe what's right for the best for our customers and the public would preside here. So yes, I believe that would be an option that we would hold in our cards.
Thank you so much. I would like to go to Brussels. Mrs. Van den Brand, Mrs. Minister, is the implementation of coaches just to guarantee that there is enough vehicles and guarantee social distancing, would that be an option in Brussels?
At this moment, we're not using that option. So I think it's an inspiring model, but it is a very, very different situation. So we haven't done that anyway. So we are all full public owned. So at this moment, we're trying to work with the current operator. We do have the material, the buses, it's a matter of the drivers, but I think the situation is comparable to New York, that we have a unionized situation, and it's not, there's a lot of regulation around it, and I don't think, well, we would need some serious regulation adaptations before we could do it. But I think if it would be necessary in the future, because of the COVID crisis, I'm open for all suggestions. So I have written it down as an idea for who knows.
Thank you so much. Special times need special regulations.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your answers. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to address to all of you right now, because we will launch our first poll of this session. It's also a theme that has been raised in the questions you have been asking. We would like to know what initiatives you would value most to, let's say, restore the trust of the passenger in collective transport. We hear the European Commission, we hear national authorities saying, please stick to your personal vehicles. We, at a certain time, are convinced that we will have to restore the confidence of the audience in public transport, in collective transport. So what is the best? You can only choose one, I'm sorry. What is the best way to do this? Is this offering free public transport for a limited period? Is this guaranteeing that we have lesser passengers, and so guaranteeing social distancing on our vehicles? Is it adding extra features, extra tools, etc.? Or will we need a massive promotional campaign to encourage people to use public transport? We have about 30 seconds more to answer that question, and the answers are coming in massively, so thank you very much. Okay, 5 more seconds. Thank you so much. Hannes, can you show us the results? But as we see right now, offering free public transport is hardly seen as a solution, as is a promotional campaign afterwards. Making available of hand shells, dividers, so extra tools on the buses is, to the opinion of more than 50% of our attendees, the best way to restore confidence. For your information, ladies and gentlemen, all the slides that the speakers are using and this poll and the results will be published on the website and made available to all of you. Thank you very much for your very active participation. Let's go back east. Let's go to India. Mr. Prasanna Patwardhan is the president of BOKI, which is the Confederation of Private Operators in India. So we leave the public PTA, we go to the private companies who also are very needed to deliver their services when our bus services are restarting again. Prasanna, thank you very much for joining us again. The word is yours.
Thank you, Jan. And thank you for giving me this opportunity, because I am learning myself a lot many things from the people, those who are already into operations. As far as India is concerned, our operations are totally under lockdown. So there are almost no operations, probably 2-3% vehicles must be running, that too with some companies or for government or somewhere. Otherwise, everything is down. So I will take you to my slides. So is it visible now?
No, it is, yes.
Okay. So one of the first thing is India has about something like 1.5 million total buses, out of which 1.5 million buses are operated by private operators. And many of the operators in India are very small operators. So that number is more than 20,000 operators. Buses mainly used for 4 kind of purposes. First is tourism purpose. I will not be talking about tourism much because we already have a special session on it. Second is regular services, which includes intra-city and intercity. Third is employee mobility, and fourth is school buses. So in the past, inter and intra-city, as far as public transport is concerned, public operators are mostly in losses. Private operators in intercity and city also are barely surviving because there is no viability gap funding whatsoever is provided for private operators. Ticket rates are very, very low, and they are decided by government. And they are not changed for years because of political interference. Taxation on buses is quite high, particularly intercity buses taxation is quite high, which goes as high as 17.5% of your revenues. And in city, it goes up to 5% of your revenues. But it differs from state to state because we have 29 states and every state has their own rules and regulations. So it's a federal structure. But still, somewhere there, the taxation is quite high. Most important point today to note is most of these buses or most of these operators are surviving only because of overloading, because of low rate structure. So say, for example, in a sitting capacity of city bus, which is 32 seats plus 18 standees, we carry almost about 100 people. And that capacity once comes down, then what happens is the bigger challenge. Present situation, as I said, is it is completely under lockdown. We have about 33,000 active cases, out of which 8,000 are already recovered and gone home, and about 1,000 deaths. So compared to many countries, our country has taken many proactive steps, and because of which there is not much of a spread of this epidemic. No services are operating, and most of the places, drivers are sitting idle at their workshops or homes, or they have gone back to hometowns. And as you know, India is very farming-based economy. So most of these drivers, they come from farming background. So once they go back, and once our monsoon starts, which is in the month of June, then it is going to become very seriously challenging how to bring those people back. So driver will be a serious problem. No company has resources because, as I said, like New York or even China or Brussels, those cities, they have organized transport, they have some money with them. If they do not have money, at least government is there to support them. I am really very happy to know that in New York, they are talking something like $3.4 billion and $4 billion kind of aid to bus systems, which is phenomenal, you know. Till date, our government has not come up with any scheme, but we are hopeful that our government will also come up with most of the schemes, because at present, most of the government machinery is very much busy in managing the COVID-19 epidemic. So central government do have some money, but state governments and local bodies do not have money. They are also struggling to pay their own salaries. Though banks have money, but banks are not willing to lend that money, and they are very selective in choosing their clients. So overall scenario of money is really bad. What do I see in future? If you look at the future, due to social distancing norms, carrying capacity of the buses is going to come down by less than half. And when your carrying capacity of the bus is going to come down by 1.5, that means your revenues are going to come down by 1/4 or less than that, 5% or 10%. So without any support, private operators forget about that operating their services. With social distancing, private operator will not be able to operate city bus services. Intercity bus services, if at all, I'm coming to solution. So there are some solutions by which intercity buses probably will be able to operate to some extent. Public operators would require 4 times viability gap funding. Whether government gives that viability gap funding or no is a big question mark, because they, as I said, they do not have any money. People also do not have any money to buy new vehicles. And owners of the vehicle, they will probably drive their own vehicles and they will commute by their own vehicles. So naturally, your roads are becoming more and more congested. So that is how we see future for this particular sector of public transport. I believe that private and public operators need to be supported by providing one-time aid, because they need to start their operations. and they will require viability gap funding for next at least 1 or 2 years, because this is going to be a serious challenge to keep their services running. And since local bodies and state governments do not have, central government will only have to come up with some solution, or some international community like World Bank or some funding mechanism needs to be found out. So something needs to be done here seriously. Taxation on buses is quite high, as I said. So if that taxation brings down to zero, then at least intercity buses with taxation zero will be able to survive. But city buses, even after zero taxation, they will require some additional help. Fuel today, 1/3 of the price is basic price and 2/3 are the taxes. So if those taxes are waived off, then as I said, intercity will survive to some extent, but city bus even then will require some support from government. Government should come up with some scheme to provide safety gears or whatever modifications, sanitization, standardization you require to ensure safety of the buses. Then for that also some aid is required. So these are the kind of solutions which we have thought of. If some of these solutions are given, then there is some hope that these services will keep on running. For employee mobility, I see a different scene, because companies will have to use more buses due to social distancing. Additional company which are not providing buses to presently to their employees, they will also probably prefer to bring their employees in more secured environment and will require buses. So it will create a supply side of a problem rather than buses, because one side you have less drivers because drivers are very short in number, and on second side you have requirement of more number of buses. So there is a catch here. But $1 million question is whether companies in this stage will be willing to pay more for such services. Because if your carrying capacity is less, naturally your per person cost, per employee carrying cost would be more. And this will decide future of this sector. And almost similar situation you will find in schools. Schools also, schools will have to have more number of buses. Parents also would prefer their child to go in buses than go cramped into smaller vehicles, which is quite rampant in India. So both of them, if they are willing to share more money, then these school buses and survive, but I will say thrive. So this is the situation in overall country. And I'm open for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prasanna. The questions we have seen coming in while you were speaking were very specifically referring to the Indian situation, which is quite clear, I think. But also lots of questions about how we as private companies will be able to pay for things if we only can have a capacity of 50% and stuff like that more. So you already mentioned that the interference of a third party, a third financing party, might be a help. Yeah, we'll be listening to Ms. Basu from the World Bank in a minute from now. But how will you, as private companies, reach the help of any development bank? It could be the World Bank, it could be the Asian Development Bank, it could be anything. This is a question that I would like to pose to Ms. Basu, and if needed, I'll come back to you after this presentation, Prasanna. If that's okay for you. Good?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
One thing which I would like to mention here is, see, it is very important that country like India having a large number of population, and which is very important because we are into global economy and no epidemic stays local. So if India wants, global community wants India to keep this COVID-19 controlled, and at the same time take care of its environment, then helping public transport at this stage is very, very important. because if public transport collapses in India, it is going to be chaotic situation for the entire world. So that is why I believe that this is high time that good organizations like World Bank should come forward and help countries like ours, wherein we have shown commitment. Our Prime Minister has shown commitment that if it is required, how disciplined India can be.
Yeah.
It is surprise to us also, the kind of discipline what we are following. So we have not seen this kind of discipline before. So this is my request to the entire global community, that this is the time we require your help and support.
Thank you so much. I recognize a lot of what you're saying in other parts of the world as well. So it's not only in India that the situation is like that, and we can ask the question, what this crisis will do for our evolution towards zero emission public transport, right? So this remains to be seen. But we have a direct line with the World Bank. So I'd like to give the words to Ms. Basu and see how the World Bank can help public transport, as well public as private operators in this crisis. Ms. Basu, thank you.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate inviting me to this forum. So first, a little introduction on the World Bank. The World Bank is a multilateral funding agency that was created at a conference in the mountains of New Hampshire in 1944. Its purpose was to help rebuild the European countries devastated by World War II. The two main funding arm of the World Bank Group consist of IBRD, which is popularly known as World Bank, but we also have a private financing arm called IFC, which is an International Finance Corporation. And we lend only to developing countries. Over the years, the bank has grown to be one of the largest sources of funding for projects aimed at reducing poverty. So poverty reduction is our main objective. Moving to COVID-19, the World Bank Group has approved a 14 billion emergency package aimed at a response to COVID-19. Of this, about 6 billion is going to go towards setting up healthcare facilities and related services. While the request in the past 2 months from our client countries has been primarily to support the health sector, but as that sector stabilizes, we are expecting to see more and more requests from other sectors, and transport is going to be one of the key areas where we are expecting a lot of requests. The key trends that we are seeing in the transport sector, and I'm going to focus mainly on the bus operation because that's the primary mode of transport in most of our client countries. One is a rapid move towards contactless ticketing. In several countries where we work, we still see a prevalence of paper ticketing. And we are going to see that's going to change. In countries in Jakarta, for instance, to give you an example, they have already moved to QR code. PT Trans Jakarta will implement a non-cash payment system at all their bus stops to prevent transmission of COVID-19. Top-up stations are going to be available at BRT stations. In Kenya, there's something interesting that's happening. The Matatu operators are going to be accepting payment through M-Pesa, which destroys a long-standing myth that informal transport and cash go hand in hand. We are going to be seeing rapid changes in the design of buses in terms of separation of drivers with ticket sellers and passengers, some of which were already mentioned by some of the panelists. Physical infrastructure changes, design of bus stops in countries like India, where there is a lot of crowding in bus stop, one needs to really think about urban planning. Dedicated space for queuing would be another area where a lot of thinking has to go into. Digitization and connectivity will again be one of the key enabling move towards seamless mobility. So the key question for us and policymakers is that we are going to be seeing a lot of costs that's going to be incurred by operators, public and private, post-COVID. There's going to be an increase in the supply of buses. So how can public transport continue to be profitable is something that we as policymakers need to think about. What can the World Bank do to support the sector financially? We are going to be extending our traditional low-cost financing loans to countries. So typically, the World Bank loans are long-term, 20 to 25 years, very low interest that can be given to any sector. It's demand-driven, so the countries come to us requesting for a loan in a particular sector. We then work with the Ministry of Finance in scoping out the project. And then once the project is negotiated, the loan then goes to the finance ministry, which is then on lend to a particular sector, or in a federal system like India, it is on lend to a particular state. We also have development policy loans. These are loans which are used not for building infrastructure, but for implementing policy. So let's say post-COVID, the public transport system in a country decides that there is going to be some fundamental changes in terms of public transport policy. We can have a lending program which supports the new policies that are going to be implemented. Now, coming to the very specific questions on private sector lending, although most of our lending is focused to the public sector, we have different instruments that can be used by the private sector. For instance, we have credit lines and guarantees to support private sector lending. To give you an example, the way a credit line would work is that our low-cost funding would go to the Ministry of Finance, which would then on lend the money to selected participating financial institutions, or PFIs. The PFIs can then co-finance the loan with some equity participation and in turn lend it to private sector. So that's one way private sector can access our concessional funds. Another instrument that we have is called partial risk sharing facility. We have used it a lot in the energy sector, and we can also use it in the transport sector. This is where the government creates an additional liquidity for the private sector. So you establish a partial risk sharing facility between the government and the private operator. The government can give a minimum revenue guarantee to the operator, almost like an annuity, let's say, which can be backstopped by a letter of credit from the World Bank. So let's say if the government fails to pay, the operator can then draw on the letter of credit. So this is another way a private operator can access our funds. We also have credit enhancements for risk mitigation. These are liquidity reserve facility to cover debt payment obligation. And again, a recent example would be one where we had used this in China for a green urban financing project. And this can again be used very easily in the transport sector. So this would cover repayment risks. And again, a credit line can be set up to banks, and then the private sector can access that. If we now move on to IFC, which lends directly to our private sector clients. There are two kinds of lending the IFC does. One is they do a lot of PPP projects, some of which are done together with the World Bank. The other is IFC often does equity investments in companies. Currently, IFC's focus post-COVID is to focus on their existing clients because they first want to make sure that their existing clients are, their financial situation has not completely collapsed. So they are looking at, providing working capital to their existing clients, refinancing facility, rescheduling existing debt to cover cost of delays, providing working capital to meet higher demand. So anybody who is an existing client of IFC, they can expect a lot of support from IFC. The way one can get in touch with the bank and the IFC, let me first tell you how the bank works. It typically, if a country that wants to request a World Bank loan, the nodal entity, in the case of transport, it will be the transport minister, would get in touch with the Ministry of Finance, will discuss the program that they want support on. The Ministry of Finance then gets in touch with the World Bank. In the case of IFC, it's slightly different. IFC often directly works with the client. And if anybody is interested, they can write to me separately and I can put them in touch with that particular country's IFC office, and then they can have a discussion on that. So in short, we are expecting our financial support to most of our client countries to increase post-COVID, particularly in the transport sector. We are ready and we are available to work in any capacity. Besides financing, we also do a lot of knowledge-based advisory work. And that is where we partner with, even cities like New York, cities like London. We actually have an active partnership with Transport for London, for instance, in bringing in global knowledge in a very local context. And I'll be happy to answer any questions or take any emails. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raki. I see that our time is spent, so we'll have to conclude. There is one thing I would like to be sure of, Raki. That means contacting the World Bank goes via the Minister of Finance. Are we always talking about the federal minister, or can this also be, like in the case of India, the regional minister or the state minister?
It's always the federal minister. So just to give you an example for India, where there are 29 states. So the states, let's say, so the transport ministry in a particular state will get in touch with the finance ministry in that state. The finance ministry then gets in touch with its counterpart, the finance ministry in the federal government, who in turn will get in touch with us. So it's always the federal ministry who is the contact point for us.
Okay. Knowing, Raki, that about 80% of worldwide private bus operators are small or medium-sized enterprises, do you have any advice for them how to approach the World Bank?
Well, they can't directly approach the World Bank, but what they could definitely do is get in touch with the transport department in their particular city or state, and essentially come up with a program that is required to help them get back on their feet, based on which the government can then approach us for a lending for a lending program. So my suggestion would be first to understand what is the requirement, over how many years, what is the funds going to be used for. There has to be clear accountability and transparency in that. And with that proposal, you get in touch with your transport ministry in your country, who in then turn can get in touch with us.
So there can be a very important intermediate role for professional federations or confederations in the country itself.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's clear. I'm going to conclude right now. I'm asking you, ladies and gentlemen, not to leave this seminar immediately. We have one last poll that you will see after I mention again that all presentations will be available online via the busworldacademy.org website. The recording of this webinar will be available as well as the polls and the results from Monday, May the 4th onwards. Next Monday, you can have everything on this webinar available on our website. The Q&A, the questions that were not answered during this webinar will be sent to the speakers. The speakers will provide some answer to that. And those answers will be published on our website from next Wednesday onwards. So that's from May the 6th onwards. I would like to thank all the speakers. I see that the minister has already left us, which is forgiven. And thank you, Raki. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Prasanna. Thank you, Fong, for your participation. We probably will have a next webinar. It has to be confirmed, but please keep May 14th open to see more how we can restore passengers' trust and faith in public transport. Thank you, everybody, and I see you in about 2 weeks. Thank you very much, everybody.